especially because last night I had this bizarre anxiety dream in which Hugh Laurie and I were throwing lawnmowers at each other, but it wasn't like an like acrimonious. I think it was some sort of sport.
Yeah, I once had a
Throwing
dream
lawn-
that Jessica Tandy and Hume Cronin were firing cubes of ham out of a confetti cannon. So,
Nice. I like that.
celebrities showing up in dreams.
That's right. Outstanding. All right,
Okay,
let's
so
do it.
let me read this intro. Struggling to pay rent, working multiple jobs, the rich gaming the system. These issues make headlines today, but they were also front and center in the very first episode of Good Times. Turns out not much has changed. In this episode, we dive into the pilot, Getting Up the Rent, and explore how it tackles poverty, race, and resilience, then and now. You're listening to Real Stories, Real Problems with Rachael and Roxanne.
Hi, Rachel. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Roxanne. How are you?
I am really excited for this week's episode. Good Times is one of my favorite shows. I watched it when it first was on the air because I'm that old. And it was such a powerhouse of a drama. It was one of the first shows, if not the first show, to address really delicate topics. I mean, all of the family had touched upon racism, certainly, but Good Times, they weren't afraid to discuss heroin addiction, abortion, STDs, crime, gun violence, just so many topics that, are still, very important today. Um, and I mean, of course, I was very young. I was only like 7 or so when the show started, and I wasn't. Of course, I didn't really get all of the social stuff, but my parents, they explained a great deal to me about it, and it just gets better throughout. It gets better watching it, later as an adult and whatnot. And you're right, not a lot has changed, unfortunately.
Yeah, I remember watching this in reruns because it was like in the summer when I was out of school, and during the day it was like Gilligan's Island and
Yeah,
Good Times, and there was a block of shows with the Brady Bunch and that were just from
I Dream
like
of
11
Jeannie.
a.m.
Yeah,
to 1 p.m. You were chilling watching TV because it was summertime and your parents couldn't afford a babysitter, and so that's what you were doing. Uh,
yep.
and so I have very fond memories of Good Times. I recently rewatched a couple of seasons and it still holds up. It's still such a
Yeah,
good show. And
absolutely.
so when I had this week where I was like, I have some stuff going on, I don't have time to watch a whole entire documentary. This was what came to mind was let's talk about an episode of Good Times.
Absolutely. I love it when we can talk about TV. Being a child of that generation, that's my thing. And listeners, absolutely. If there's a TV show that you would like Rachel and I to check out, by all means, drop a suggestion. We'd be more than happy to do that. We need a lot of feedback.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely want to hear from you. And this very first episode of Good Times, this actually was the pilot episode that they filmed.
Yes.
And this was in 1974. And in
Yeah, take us there.
1974, that was the year Nixon resigned after the Watergate scandal. That was the year that the terracotta army of Shah was discovered in China. All of the terracotta soldiers. Um, that that was the year that Carrie came out, Stephen King's debut novel. That was the year that ABBA won the Eurovision Song Contest with the song Waterloo.
Mhm.
And for those of us who are true crime and horror aficionados, 1974 was the year Ronald Joseph DeFeo Jr. shot and killed all 6 of his family members while they were asleep in their beds in the Amityville, New York house.
Yes, I remember every single one of those things with equal importance. Watergate, Carrie. Absolutely. And yeah, as a true crime nut, a serial killer, spree killer nut, absolutely. The DeFeo murders, I remember that very clearly too. No wonder I'm the way I am. I mean, really.
Yeah, we love ghosty things. We love true crime things. And every so often we look at each other and like, let's go take a spooky road trip and see something spooky. And the Amityville house is one that's on our list of things we should go check out.
Definitely. Definitely.
But yeah, so in 1974, this was the pilot episode of Good Times. And this was um normally on my notes, I have a what was this documentary about or what was this episode of the
Right.
show about? And generally it can be broken down into one or two words, like a very simple topic. Like when we were doing the Operation Varsity Blues, that was about racketeering. But this episode touched on so many topics.
Yes.
It's not just any one thing that this episode is about, but essentially it is about the lived experience of being poor and black in 1970s US uh,
Right.
economy.
Right. And remember, 74 was only 6 years after, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. being assassinated, Bobby Kennedy being assassinated, the civil rights movement. It was only 4 years after Kent State. The country was very violent and very frightening. And that's something that I do remember, that visceral fear. Um, that we all had, and my parents' obsession with keeping the family safe, always locking the doors, da 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 da, the whole. And we didn't live in remotely in a dangerous area, but that's how I was raised from that time period. You don't trust anybody. You have to always look behind you, and this, that, and the other. We're all paranoid. All of us from that generation were all paranoid. And yeah, well, for good reason. There was some scary stuff going on.
Yeah. And even like the very first couple of lines of this show, we're introduced to the character of Michael, who, just for, informative purposes, Norman Lear wrote this show with the real life Michael Evans, who this
It's
his
Mike
family is
Evans.
based off
Yep.
of. So the character of Michael in the show was based off of the guy who helped Norman Lear make this show. And the very first line was he came in and he was mad at his friend. He wasn't going to play with him anymore because they were playing cops and militants and they kept making Michael be the cop. So he wasn't going to play anymore.
Right, exactly. Right.
So,
And Michael's such an annoying character, to be honest. It's just he's just like what, and he kept saying through this episode, boy is a racist white word.
yeah. Like I both see the annoyance of it and I absolutely love it in the same breath because every kid goes through periods where you pick up this is now the thing that's important to me. This is my new interest. This is like my thing. And as you are developing your personality and figuring out who you are, and very clearly Michael is in his identifying as a person of color in the United States and as identifying as, an oppressed person and what that means and how he can, figure out who he is and fight against the injustices of the world. But that is his big focus. And every kid goes through that. Every kid finds new things that, oh, now this is a thing I am aware of, and now I'm gonna do this. This is my thing for now the next little bit.
And Michael already has $2 saved up to go to law school. So yeah, okay, kudos to you, Michael. To
Yeah, and when you
become a
think
civil
about it,
rights lawyer. Yeah.
at this point in time, in another episode, like two episodes in, they're talking to James about he's going on a job interview, and right now he makes, I think he said $2.25 an hour, or $2
Oh,
an hour, something like that, and he was applying for a job that would pay $4.25 an hour, and they were joking like, then that would make you on par with like the president of the bank. You would be making such good money. And clearly, the president of the bank would not be making $4.25 an hour, but that's more than double the minimum wage at that point, or almost double the minimum wage at that point. So,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, my first job was in 1984, and minimum wage was 3.25 an hour, and I thought I was living the dream, you know.
yeah, my first job when I was 2016, minimum wage was $5.75.
Yep.
And it is now $7.25. And my first job was almost 30 years ago. So clearly there are still some issues. But yeah, so just knowing that, talking about these small amounts of money as if they're like really huge amounts, and like watching the characters interact together, and knowing that this episode was designed to set up characters so that you know that Michael is, his focus is justice for the Black community, and that
Right.
Thelma, her focus is education, and that JJ's focus is painting and being like silly. And so you're kind of getting to know who the characters are. But from the very first couple of moments, JJ and Thelma are going at each other and insulting each other in the kitchen, which happens in literally every episode going forward from.
Yes, that's their thing. Sure.
And I mean, I grew up with a brother, and there was like 6 years between us. We were not close in age, but
I didn't even know you had a brother.
yeah,
Really?
he's
I,
6 years
I
younger
learned
than me.
something new about my friend and co-host. Yep.
But like, even we had a decent sized house. We had our own separate bedrooms. Like, we weren't close in age, and we still annoyed the bejesus out of one another. Like, that's just part and parcel of having a sibling. Is you're horrible to your siblings and you annoy each other, but then if anybody else outside of the house has anything negative to say, then you'll throw hands.
Right.
Like, it,
Exactly.
but yeah, they, from the very first moments that you're seeing that sibling infighting, you're seeing what's important to Michael, you're seeing those, and then an eviction notice shows up.
Right.
And that's the focus of this episode, is they have been given an eviction notice and they need to come up with the money to pay the rent. And how are they going to do that? That's the through line of this episode. And that's something that I think a lot of people today can understand. Um,
Yes, I certainly can. I've been on the receiving end of those notices more than once, and it is terrifying. It is terrifying. It seems like an insurmountable amount of money, to come up with. And it's funny because, the James, the father, is like, "Oh, we got two of those while your mother was in the hospital getting her appendix out." Talked about it because Monty, who works with the in the projects, was, going to get an extension, and Monty didn't. Monty did was not able to help.
yeah, Monty was useless. And
Yes.
I really, like, as a mom, seeing this situation where an eviction notice showed up while she was in the hospital, and everybody's like, well, we'll deal with it, I guess, when mom gets out of the hospital. That felt very real. And my husband is a lovely, competent person, and I know that he would not ignore an eviction notice if it showed up while I was gone. But the idea that the family looks around and they're like, well, mom's the fixer and she's not here right now, so we're gonna wait until she's back to fix it.
She comes home to fix it.
Yeah,
Right.
that kind of felt very very close to home for me. Uh,
Yeah, exactly. And of course, Florida was even more upset because, it's like, why did you tell me this was going on? Well, you were in the hospital. We didn't want to bother you. It's like at least there she had a morphine drip, but been a little more bearable.
Yep. And then my very favorite character in the whole show showed up, Willona from
Oh,
next door.
Bologna.
And Janet Dubois, who plays Willona, just the most incredibly beautiful woman, and she is so good at what she does. She truly does embody this character in a way that, like, I can't even really explain it, but that silly kind of back and forth, I'm gonna make a joke and then I'm gonna laugh about it and hug you, and like it felt like they were really true friends. She just really has
Definitely.
that. And
Yeah, the you can tell the love between those two, between Florida and Walona. And I mean, just they're such polar opposites. Florida is so family focused. Well, we do see this with Walona later when did she adopts Penny. But Florida is so spiritual, so family focused, not flashy at all, very subdued, down to earth but yet she's still able to kind of come out of it a little when Walona comes around. They're able to banter back and forth and whatnot. I think Walona's good for Florida. I
Yeah.
really do.
I get kind of like almost a reverse Lucy and Ethel, where Florida is
Yeah.
the dignified, down to earth, like we're gonna do things the right way, and Walona's like the sassy one who's got a plan. Like
Well, yeah, she's always got a scheme. Uh-huh.
yeah, so it was so fun to see her pop up. And then they had this beautiful little back and forth because Walona's there and then the guys show up to kick them out for the eviction. And
Right,
she's
right.
doing this, "Oh, has anybody ever told you that you look like a young Billy D. Williams?" He's like, "Yeah, when I show up to haul away their furniture, everybody says that." And she's like, "Well,
That
what
looks
about"
like Billy D. Well, right.
yeah, it's like, "Well, what about Sidney Poitier? Has anybody ever told you you look like Sidney Poitier?" And he kind of is like, "No." And she's like, "Yeah, there's a reason for that."
Right. It's like, people lie to you a lot, don't they? Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Walonica's got the quick comebacks, and she says all the things that we wish we could, you know.
Yeah, then she's just much more casual about things, and she has a job down later you find out that she works selling like clothes and jewelry and stuff at a little shop nearby, and so
There's
she's
a thrift store, doesn't she? I think she works at a
like
thrift store, a secondhand store or something, a
something
boutique
similar.
of some sort. Yeah.
But yeah, so she is a divorced woman and she's working on her own and she's like that embodying the independent woman of the 70s kind of vibe is her character on this show. And she's so fun and she's immediately in it like defending this family. This is clearly these are the people who are important to her. She's
That's
just
her
as much a part
family.
of this. Yeah. Oh, she's so wonderful.
Oh, absolutely, and not afraid to talk about sex and men and that she likes sex. Oh my God, a female character on television in the 1970s talking about, and not married sex. Like you said, she's divorced, but, you get the feeling she was the one who told him to kick dirt,
Yeah.
A absolutely. And, she's always talking about men, the dates that she has, and of course, they always go badly, unfortunately. This one mugged her because James asks, "Tell us about that date you had last night. Let's get our minds off this eviction." And she describes he was this gorgeous man, and then he mugged me, and that's pretty much Walona's luck, but it doesn't matter. She keeps going. She's a bright ray of sunshine, absolutely, in the show.
Yep. And at this point, when they're like hauling away the furniture or trying to, and Walona's there, the family all pulls together. And so James says, "You know what? I'm going to get my pool cue and I'm going to go hustle some pool." And Florida and Walona are standing there. Walona says, "You know what? Let's go down to the welfare office. We'll see if we can get you on welfare." And JJ and his brother and sister have determined that they're going to go try to see if they can beg money at the Marshall Fields. Like go down there and convince people to give them cash for being so down on their luck and
Right.
or for stealing from the the Marshall Fields. And when Florida calls him out on it, is like, "JJ, you're not stealing." He goes, "No, it's not stealing, it's eking." Like he comes up
It's
with another
me.
word and like
Right, yeah. It's like, "No, you're gaming the system, JJ," and then they come up with this wonderful elaborate scheme where, Thelma's gonna pretend to, fakes a faint in this dramatic, wonderful, over the top fake fainting. It's hilarious,
oh my God,
and Jane yeah.
her over the top fainting reminded me so much of my daughter when she was little, when she wanted to pretend to be dramatic and do the things. It was that kind of over the top, the way like a 3.5 or 4.5-year-old child would do. It was so cute and so funny.
Right, exactly, and yeah, and then JJ pretended to be a citizen standing by, and they were gonna like, "This girl hasn't eaten in 2 weeks," and yeah, it was, but I mean, the serious side of that is the lengths that people will go to avoid being thrown out in the cold, and we are told that it is winter in Chicago, and a couple characters talk about how cold it is outside.
Yeah, and they talk about like, and even like when they're going through this process as the show opens, Thelma's making breakfast and she's making oatmeal. That's literally the only breakfast we ever see them eat over the course of the show
That's right. They do eat a lot of oatmeal.
because it's the cheapest possible thing that you can buy and it
Right.
bulks out so you can feed a group of people. And like at one point, not in this episode, but the following episode, they're sitting around eating oatmeal, and you can see Michael with like 6 spoons of sugar into his oatmeal as he's having this conversation. Like clearly, oatmeal is a base part of
Sure.
their diet because it's so cheap and so filling. But like their overall poverty is addressed multiple times throughout this episode. And while we don't see James hustle pool, we see him leave to go do that. We do see Florida and Walona go down to the welfare office where she's denied.
Yep.
They don't give her anything. And the guy who's there, he's dressed like stereotypically what you would think of as like a cartoon pimp kind of thing, the
Right. With
purple suit.
the purple velvet suit and the hat and everything. Yeah. And the walk, that really affected walk. Right. Yeah.
And he keeps trying to bum money off of people. And he sits down with Florida and he's just like, hey, did they give you any green? And she's like, no, go away.
Go away. Right. He came down to try to hustle the women, who he believes are single women, of course, because they're alone at the welfare office, to hustle them out of what they just got paid. And these things really happen. That's what's the tragic thing. I mean, of course, again, it's played for laughs because it's a comedy, but that absolutely happens. There are opportunists that hang around the welfare office and the unemployment office and homeless shelter, wherever desperate women in particular are, congregating. There are these men that will try to take opportunity, with them. And that's unfortunately how a lot of sex trafficking starts too.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
just made good times really depressing. But yeah, that is the a lot of times unfortunately the result.
so I know it's not good times, but we're going to take a half a step over. Have you seen the Tiger King documentary series on Netflix?
I have not seen it, but I know what it is.
So I did not see it when it came out in 2020 when everyone and their mom watched it because it was the pandemic and what we are going to do. You're going to sit around and watch the Tiger King documentary. I didn't watch it then,
Sure.
but I watched it like a year ago and I stopped halfway through and I went and I got my daughter and I brought her up and I was like, I need you to see this scene because it's the scene where Joe Exotic is talking about how he gets people to come work at his tiger sanctuary. And
Right.
just for funsies, I lived about 50 miles from Joe Exotic my whole life. Like,
There you go.
yeah, I was very close, maybe 100 miles. But he's talking about how he would take baby tigers down to the bus stop and find homeless kids and tempt them with the baby tigers to come work. Isn't it so cute? And I looked at my daughter and I was like, that is how you get tricked into being sex trafficked or being imprisoned by someone. If somebody shows up and offers you this cute thing or offers you this opportunity when it feels like you have nothing else, there's a good chance that is trafficking. And she looked at me and she's
Oh,
like, oh my God, if somebody showed up with a baby tiger, that would totally work for me. I would absolutely go
sure.
with the baby tiger guy. And I was like, yes, this is why we're having this conversation. So you know not to do that.
Oh
Uh,
my God. I just got a chill. That's terrifying. That's
but that's,
absolutely terrifying. That's
yeah.
how
Oh,
predators work.
it is. It's exactly how predators work. And while it was played for laughs in good times, that's what this guy is. Like he's there, he's trying to hustle money, but from the outfit and the overall demeanor, there is this undercurrent of he's looking for money, he's looking for women who will work with him. I'm
Right.
thinking he is looking to sex traffic women and he's talking to
Oh,
Florida.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure he really is a pimp, and a pimp character does show up later in Good Times, and Sweet Daddy Williams is the name of the character, and we never actually see him with any women, but it's, very clear that's what he is. I believe this is probably a prototype for that character. And definitely, I mean, he's not at the welfare office trying to like talk to single guys. He goes to Florida and then Willona comes in, who of course shoots him down, with a sassy remark, and then we see him strolling after another woman that we see just walk past, and sure he ended the day getting some money and maybe getting a phone number, Absolutely.
Yeah, it's one of those things where this show does an excellent job of making you laugh at things that otherwise would not be funny, finding the funny in those hard moments. And like even watching Thelma and JJ and Michael try to figure out this swindling of, okay, how are we going to convince people to give us money? We can't just go and ask. We need this big over the top situation. Like they are three kids figuring out how to beg for money, the most effective way to beg for money so they are not evicted. This is a hard moment that is played up for laughs.
Yeah.
And it's
Well, in the 1970s, if you begged for money, you had to do it in person. I at least had the shield of a GoFundMe when I was desperate,
yeah.
and I did get some comments and private messages saying you should be ashamed of yourself for doing this. I knew your mother and father, and they would be so ashamed of you for doing this. Now, those were just a few people, and I might add, one of them was a relative
Of
on my
course.
mom's side of the family. And this is yeah, so that was difficult. But I mean, of course, overwhelmingly, I got such a wonderful response from my friends and my loved ones. Um, but begging in person is hard, it really is. And your dignity takes a hit, and Florida said to Willona, "Oh, I gotta go and walk into the welfare office. I can't believe I'm going on." Well, yeah,
Yeah. I have never begged for money for, like, paying my bills. The closest thing that I have ever come to that was at my high school graduation. I had a ton of people over, and it was a bunch of my friends and my family, and we were all sitting around and gambling, and my friend who had taken everybody's money left, and so we had no more money, and my cousin was like, "Well, I can play the guitar. Let's go outside to 7-Eleven and play the guitar for an hour and see if we can get more gambling money." And so we did. We went, and he's playing like a $2,000 guitar. It's a very expensive guitar. And we're
I
sitting there, a group of like 18-year-olds singing and
right.
playing a guitar outside the 7-Eleven. And I
The
think
7-Eleven.
we made like a buck 75. We made no money.
Okay, I was gonna say, how'd it work out?
Well, it was a weird enough situation where I could see people being like, "This is not somebody who needs money. I don't know what your deal is, but don't not here," kind
Right,
of
right,
thing. Um, but like, so that's the closest I've ever come to like busking or panhandling. And
right,
while it was fun and silly, because it was me and my friends being fun and silly, and we didn't need that money,
right.
it would not have been fun and silly if my whether or not I had a place to sleep that night depended on it.
Yeah. No, it's not fun. It's not fun, it's not silly, and your dignity does take a hit, and you can't meet anybody's eyes, and you pray to God you won't see someone you know. Awkward, That's why I was always sure to do my panhandling in places where nobody I knew would ever go, and because I was bad at it. I sucked at it. I really did. So thank God that part of my life is over, Oh, so
Yeah.
and did you know John Amos lives one town away from my hometown?
I did not know that.
Yes, and he still lives there, and from the people that I know that have met him, he is the nicest, kindest, most wonderful man. He'll love to talk he loves to talk to you about good times and his other projects, all the stuff that he's done. So if you are ever in the Central Jersey area, by all means, try to find John Amos. He is a very nice, approachable guy, and he'll sit and he'll talk to you about good times and anything else you want to talk about.
Yeah, I
So I
read
was
an
glad when I heard that. I'm like, oh, is he nice? Please tell me he's nice. And I'm like, he's nice. Oh,
Well,
great.
and I read an interview with him as in the research for this, where he talked about when he left Good Times, his character was killed off.
Yeah.
That he had gone off for a job interview and was killed in a car accident. And that was because he had been vocally, like aggressively fighting with the writing staff to give them better storylines because they had veered away from the serious things that we're seeing in this first episode and into JJ's wearing a chicken hat and saying dynamite. And like that was,
Right. Every episode.
they were
Sure.
being very, very silly and less serious. And he would go to them and say things like, look, JJ is silly and wearing a chicken hat and the dynamite. And I get that that's fun and funny, but Michael wants to be a Supreme Court justice. And, you know, the other kids in the show have such drive and ambition. And all of the characters in the show have such like value to add to this. It cannot be the JJ show. Like that can't
Right.
be what this is. And then they killed him off because he was aggressive in fighting for better.
Right.
And then apparently the same thing happened with Esther Roll, who plays Florida. Later, her character gets married to somebody and moves across the country, and like leaves the kids with Walona. And then later she comes back once they've reached an agreement that that works for her to bring her back into the show. Um, but yeah, for in this first episode, they're really hard hitting, like the important stuff. I can see where John Amos would have read this script and been like, they're going to tackle the hard stuff. This is something I want to be part of.
Absolutely.
And even in that moment in the welfare office, Florida and Walona are talking, and one of them says, "Rich folks don't take welfare, do they?" And the other one says, "No, they call it subsidy."
Uh-huh. Yes. I made a little mental tick at that line too.
And
Certainly.
given what's going on with the presidential breakup with Elon and Donald Trump,
The
like,
bromance is officially over. Yeah.
but like that's the thing that is now being held over Elon's head is your government subsidies are over. We're no longer funding your companies.
Mhm.
And that's Elon Musk has taken more government money than all of the poor people in our country combined, I would bet.
I'm
Like,
sure.
and so for him to stand there and be like, you're getting too much money. You guys are a drain on the system when he gets more money than anybody else. Like,
Uh-huh. Yeah,
so yeah,
exactly.
the more things change, the more they stay the same because they were talking about this in the very first episode of Good Times.
Of good times. Exactly. Yeah. It's depressing to realize we have not come as far as we would hope that we had, because we still face all of those problems, racism, poverty, discrimination against the poor, the fact that Florida was unable to get welfare because what? Because James made $100 too much the year before. $100 between, and that was 1 month's rent.
Yep, they said
Wasn't it? The rent
at
was
one point.
$104 a month, I believe, for their apartment.
Yeah,
And
they
they
said it was
came and they
104.50. That
104.50 exactly. So because James made 1 month's rent, too much the year before, they weren't eligible for welfare. For a family of five.
Yeah, and that's been you've dealt with that recently where you've tried to get benefits and they've said, "No, you make too much." And you're like, "I work 15 hours a week, but I
Yeah,
can't make too
if
much."
that. Right, exactly. And they're like, no, no, no. Yes, in order for me to get housing benefits, I would not be allowed to make more than $186 a month.
So if somebody makes $187 a month, what kind of housing do they think they have? Like
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
it's
It
just
doesn't matter. And I'm not a poor black family.
no, you're not.
I'm a I am a highly educated white woman, and it's not any better. Yeah.
Yeah, this was one that was it was interesting to see the parallels of what they were dealing with then and what you're dealing with now and what other people are dealing with now and how It's just different shades of the same situation.
Right. Right. The numbers change, but the situation doesn't. I have no idea what the equivalent of $186 a month would have been in 1974. I can't readjust for inflation, but it was probably something like $30.
Oh, I bet you I can figure it out. Hold on, let me see.
You're good at this.
So let's see. So this was in 2025. We were looking at
Mhm.
$186, you said?
Yep,
Then that in 1974, that would have been $28.58. So you were very close.
I was very close. Yes. How ridiculous.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
And like when you look at that, there's nothing you could do for that money. You can't even feed yourself for $180 a month. And that's the number
No,
there.
certainly not.
And like when we look at
And I mean, not to mention you have like the phone bill, the storage bill, medication, you know? That's it's like, okay, so I'll be able to eat, but I can't take my psychiatric meds. Oh, that's gonna go that'll really help. Absolutely. You know?
and I just did a reverse or the inflation calculator. They paid $104 for rent in 1974. In 2025 dollars, that would be 500 or $676,
That's
which
very logical.
where you couldn't find an apartment for that kind of money anywhere in the country right now.
No, certainly not for 5. They'll have a family of 5. They have I know they have 2 in the Good Times apartment, they have 2 bedrooms. Thelma has 1 and James and Florida have the other, and Michael and JJ sleep on the sofa bed.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, and of course the 1 bathroom and the eat-in kitchen. I mean, that's yeah, you could not get that kind of an apartment. Certainly not in Chicago, today. Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolute nuts. That they were scrounging to try to pay the bills for what you it's at least 3 times that much to get a two-bedroom apartment anywhere right now. And
Absolutely.
and that's a generous like, there are places in the country you could not find a two-bedroom apartment for $1,800. It wouldn't be possible. Looking at the way that they are dealing with this, like, that they all came together and they all said, "Let's take a different avenue to trying to solve this problem." Um, and Florida has very strict morals and she's a very religious person, and she has strong feelings about James hustling pool money, and she's not comfortable with that. And so when she comes home from the welfare office and she has nothing, she was given nothing. Her kids have been there, pretending to faint, and they managed to scam some money out of the eviction guys. They
The
came back
eviction
and
guys because Thelma did her fake faint in front of the eviction guys, and apparently they were dumb enough to believe it was real. Start giving the money to JJ. Yeah, that was funny.
um and then Florida makes them give that money back because,
Yeah,
they're like, well, the poor girl hasn't eaten. And she said, well, if she weighed what she eats, she'd weigh 6 times as much as she does. So,
right, exactly.
um, and then James comes home as Florida is praying to a picture of Jesus that hangs on their wall. And that picture of Jesus is a focal point in several episodes. In fact, the next
Yeah,
episode after this one is
Black
called
Jesus. That's
Black
right.
Jesus. And it's
That's
literally JJ
a
has
great episode.
painted a picture of Jesus, but it's modeled off of Ned the wino. And and when they hang the picture up and then good things start happening to them. And Michael's theory is that now that they've got Black Jesus up on the wall, that's what's bringing them the good luck. But so like this
Right.
picture of Jesus, and it is the traditional long-haired white blue-eyed Jesus image.
Right, exactly. That all of you have seen this Jesus. Trust me. If you saw that, you go, "Yep, that's the Jesus."
Uh, and
Mhm.
it's kind of that that 70s orange background color with the oak frame. Like it looks like a 1970s picture of Jesus. That it there
Jesus, absolutely. My mother had that Jesus. She did. She had that. Yeah, that
my,
picture of Jesus.
my great
Absolutely.
grandmother had that Jesus as a clock. It was that picture, but then there was a clock that went around, like the hour hand and the minute hand.
Jesus, look at the time. Yes.
Exactly. But Florida is standing there and she's praying quietly to this, picture. And James comes in and he's got a fistful of money. He was able to, hustle the money at pool. And I forget what shot he shot. It was a
Three cushion bank shot.
three cushion bank shot. That's right.
Yep.
And so he's standing there and he comes in and he sees Florida praying and he tells the kids, I know your mom's not going to be okay with this, but I brought Monty, the idiot from the beginning that had told him nothing
Right.
was going to go wrong. I'm going to give him
Right.
the money and let him pretend he's solving this for us. And so that
Mhm.
your mom doesn't worry. And they do the whole thing where Monty's dumb and doesn't knock on the door when he's supposed to, and like he comes in and he does this very obvious like Monty's bit was no more believable than Thelma's bit. Like
No, certainly not. Monty was a terrible actor.
but he's got the money James won in his hand. He hands it over and they give it to the eviction dudes, and the eviction dudes are like, okay, that's good enough, and they leave. Back at a time before everything had to go through electronic systems, and so like right now today, I don't know if you were getting evicted and you had cash in hand. I don't know that you could hand it to somebody and avoid eviction.
You would need to get a cashier's check, which is as good as cash, which you could get at any drugstore or any Western Union. So yeah, if it does come down to the last minute, you do have a fistful of cash, you can indeed, yeah, you will not be evicted. The cashier's check is as good as cash. So
Yeah, but
of
it's
course
so
I
they're
know that. Come on. Of course I'm gonna know that.
uh but they're doing this whole bit, and so the guys that are gonna haul away the furniture take the money and they run. And then Florida turns back to the picture of Jesus and says, "Thank you, and also thank you for that wonderful pool shot or whatever, like the three bank."
Thank you for that three cushion bank shot. And she kind of winks at the picture of Jesus.
Yeah, so like she clearly morally does not like the hustling for pool money, but she also understands that her family being homeless on the streets in Chicago in the winter is not acceptable.
Of
And
course not.
so she lets some of James's willingness to kind of skirt the edges go because he's
Right.
providing for the family.
Which is exactly what he signed up for to begin with. I mean, my father hustled pool. Of course he did. Come on. But this was back when he was in high school in Philadelphia. I mean, he wasn't trying to like, pull a huge scam. He wanted extra pocket money. I mean, and nobody got hurt certainly. Um so I mean, hey, I'm sure James looked at it as, well, the Lord gave me this awesome pool ability, I'm going to use it, for some. And it's like it's also important to know James didn't continue to hustle the pool. He got the rent money and he split. He
Yeah.
didn't try to like parlay it into a bigger win so he could buy something fancy. No, he provided for his family and he left.
Yeah, that
Think
was very important. And also, it's important to know that James's character, it's established in the show, has a sixth grade education. So he does not have even so much as a middle school or high school education to fall back on to get him a job anywhere else. And at this time in the 70s, college was not expected. It was nice and could get you a cushy job potentially, but if you just had a GED or a high school diploma, that was good enough. You could do most jobs. Um,
certainly.
but sixth grade education was low enough that it would have stopped him from getting certain work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and college for a black man in the 70s? Not, absolutely not. And I think it's established later in the show that James comes from a rural area, where it was mostly farming, and I mean, you didn't need a fancy education to work a farm. You got your basic, can you do math? Good, that's it, and then you drop out. So, certainly.
Yeah, that whole thing where they were talking about his education and what kind of job he could get. I think that was in the following episode. And when I read the Wikipedia on it, it said that this episode was filmed first, but when it aired as the third episode because they wanted to create some backstory for some of the characters, because this episode just does drop you into this is the family, this is what's going on, and the next couple of episodes create more of a rounded story.
I didn't know that.
it, and like if you go on Tubi to watch it now, which is what I did yesterday,
Okay.
this is the first episode. It's aired first because it was
Right. I see. It's episode one, season one, episode one on Tubi. Yeah.
but yeah, so
Okay.
these first couple of episodes, this one and then the Black Jesus episode and then the one that follows that, are all kind of intertwined as creating the background of this family so that you understand them and their situation. Um and so you don't necessarily know in watching this episode all of this backstory about James,
Hmm.
but it feels like it's there. Like just because you don't know that doesn't mean that you don't understand the overall situation.
Right.
And really, James shows up. He's providing for his family. He's doing what he needs to do. Florida's kind of letting it go because, this is the better option, and she's gonna hold him to it later. Like she's not gonna let this become a habit or let
Right.
do this in any real way. But she accepts that this is what's going on. And then once the rent gets paid and they're all sitting around and JJ's painting and Florida's sewing and they're all
Mhm.
doing the things that they're going to do, and Michael wants to watch an all black TV show, but there are none, and his
No.
dad says, "Wait a minute, yes there is. It's the Lakers versus whoever. It's a basketball."
Right. Yeah. Professional basketball. Yeah, that pretty much was it at that time.
And so that kind of was a nod to we're creating this show because there is not another show. There is no other
Right.
representation. And
Right.
shortly after this,
Exactly.
Sanford and Son becomes a show, and there's like
Jeffersons.
the
Hmm.
Jeffersons. So there is a period here where Black people start to gain more representation on TV,
Right.
and that is incredible. And they are addressing it even within this very first episode that this doesn't exist. This should exist. That's why we're making it, kind of thing.
Yeah. That's right. Yep. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and this is such a funny show, and all the characters are so lovable. You love
Hmm.
them all. And then as the show goes on and they start introducing like unlikable characters,
Hmm.
the handyman for the building, Booker, becomes
Oh, Bookman. Oh
Bookman. Yeah,
God.
not Booker. Booker was his
Bookman.
name.
I hate Bookman.
Uh,
Everyone hates Bookman. That's the whole purpose of Bookman.
Yep, that
Yeah.
his whole character is to just be hated, absolutely hated. And then there are some other like kids that are in gangs, and then JJ had a couple of girlfriends who are really awful. One of them's a drug addict, and one of them gets pregnant and pretends it's JJ's baby. And like they bring in some unlikable characters over the course of the show. But these five, you just want nothing but the best things for these five people.
Absolutely. I would absolutely love to have dinner with this family. I mean, James and Florida's relationship, their marriage is just so wonderful. You can see there's so much love, between them. They love their family, everybody respects each other. Sure, they argue just like every family. It's very real the way the family argues, especially when there's stress with money. I mean, yeah, we've all been through, tough times financially. That's when everybody's temper gets short because everybody's afraid and starts snapping at each other, and yelling happens and fighting and whatnot. But you can tell that underneath all of that there's that deep respect and love, as like you said in the beginning. JJ and Thelma, they snark and bitch at each other, through the whole show, but at the end, I mean, so many times in future episodes, one or the other was getting in trouble and the other just will go to the wall for them. Absolutely. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, and the things that they are willing to do for one another to make life work within the situation that they are in. JJ is sharing a bed, like a fold out sofa bed, with his brother, who is at least 5 years younger than him.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
they, they clearly make this work so that Thelma can have a private bedroom. They don't
Right.
demand that space because there's two of them. They don't fight about it. There's never like a back and forth about why do you get this and I don't. They all understand that they are pitching in and making decisions that are for the betterment of everybody in the household.
Right.
And that's just so lovely to see. And I mean, I do not do well with other people in my house. Like, I love my husband. I love my daughter. We all have plenty of space. We
Oh,
all,
definitely.
pitch in and do our thing. But like, there was a time when we had a friend and her daughter who were living in the downstairs part of our house, because she was essentially homeless and she needed a place to stay. And within 6 weeks, I was like, she has to go. She has to go. And I didn't say anything to her.
No.
And 3 weeks
Right.
3 years later, she was still there, and we went through a process of needing her to leave at that point. But for almost 3 years, I was miserable, not being comfortable because there was somebody else in my house, like to the point where I don't like being perceived by other
Mhm.
people in the sense that, like, if I'm doing something and somebody comes in and they're like watching me, or I know that they can hear me, it makes me very uncomfortable.
I
And
don't blame you. That would be weird.
and it's just even like if somebody can hear me taking a shower or washing the dishes or, watching TV or whatever, knowing that I don't have any kind of actual privacy because
Right.
everything is seen or heard,
Yep.
it just makes me crazy. And I cannot imagine having 5 people living on top of each other in a tiny apartment like this. I
Yep.
would rip the hair out of my scalp.
I I can imagine. It must be terrible.
But they never at any point do any of them say anything about this being bad or wrong or uncomfortable. Like, they talk about if they had money, they'd get a big house and they'd have all this
Oh,
space.
sure.
They do the
Well,
fancy
we all
stuff.
do that. I mean, that's the fan of the winning the lottery fantasy. Sure.
But outside of that, they don't ever make each other feel bad or have anything to say about being in each other's space. Florida sets up the sewing machine in front of the TV and the kids just move to another chair so that they can see from a different angle. They're all in it together in a way that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And then I did not know this, but apparently Good Times was a spin-off of the show Maude,
Right.
which was a spin-off from All in the Family.
Family. Yes. Florida was Maud's maid. That's yeah. Yeah. Maud was Edith Bunker's cousin. And, she was a big antagonist of Archie's. Of course, they hated because Archie hates everybody. And then, Maude was so popular, she got her own show, and Florida was her maid. And then Florida became such a popular character that Norman Lear was, who also did Maude and All in the Family, was like, let's give it a shot. Let's like see if she can handle her own show. And wow, what a show. So yeah, she was a spinoff of a spinoff of a show,
Yeah,
Norman
and
Lear's.
I have seen All in the Family and I've seen Good Times, but I've never seen an episode of Maude. So now I need to go back.
It's very, very good because it's, also in the early 70s, when Roe versus Wade, first got because Maud had an abortion, and there was a whole episode about that. And Maud is a very, if you like B. Arthur, if you like the character of Maud, it's a wonderful show. Very sarcastic, very biting, high-end humor. It's really a good show. I enjoy it very much. Check it out. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's gonna be on my list of things to see now. I don't even know where I
Yeah,
would find it. But also, this show during its first season on the air was the seventh highest rated program in the Nielsen ratings, with more than 25% of all American households tuning in to see Good Times each week.
fantastic.
So this was clearly like a popular show. This was not like a niche audience that they were appealing to. A full quarter of America was really into watching Good Times.
And with good reason. I mean, that like I was saying at the beginning of of our episode tonight, just the subjects that they tackled. head on with like, and like you mentioned, unplanned pregnancy and gang activity. I mean, I left those two out of the things that I'd listed, but yeah, not afraid to never shied away from the heavy stuff. You know, certainly didn't treat it with kid gloves the way everything is treated now, you know, with trigger warnings and safe spaces and things like that. There's Yeah, they took on some really heavy stuff.
They did, and they took on, like, every episode had its own, like, main storyline, and they didn't
Mhm.
always carry over. Like, there were several points where, like, Thelma brought home a boyfriend, and he proposed to her, and she was gonna get married to him, and then her parents said no, and then he never showed up again. Like, there was no
Right.
talk about that boyfriend. Or,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
JJ was gonna go do this big thing, and then it didn't happen, and they never address it again.
They never talked about it again. Right.
Um,
Right.
and, like, JJ gets several art jobs that end up not panning out, or, like, one
Right.
where there was an episode where he gets hired to paint a mural at the bank, and
Right.
he paints this mural of the Black community that is customers for this bank. This is
Right.
the community that this bank is in, and the guy gets very upset, and he's like, "This is not what we wanted at all. I'm not paying for this." And James has to step in and be like, "Yes, you are paying for this. This was
Yeah.
what you agreed to. If you don't like it, that's fine. We can paint back over it, but you're gonna pay for the work that was done."
Right.
And then nothing ever happens. Like, JJ's, still working at a chicken place, and it's still like it, they have kind of a set, standard, but stuff happens in every episode that's kind of crazy or different, and it's never touched on again. It feels a little bit like The Simpsons in that way.
Right. Exactly. Like there's a hard reboot at the beginning of every episode. Sure.
But yeah, this was such a fun show, such an important show. I
Mm.
think this kind of media does more to move the needle on social issues than I think most people give it credit for.
Yeah. More people need to watch this.
Yes, absolutely. Um, but thanks for listening to Real Stories, Real Problems with your hosts, Rachel and Roxanne. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the pilot episode of Good Times. Join us again next week for a glimpse into another financial problem and a documentary all about it. If you enjoyed our show today, please remember to like, subscribe, and leave us a review on your podcast app. Thanks for listening. See you again next week.
Bye for now.